So we now have our question box and our voice of God with questions today will be Solveig Zarubin. We thank you for being here. We thank Bev Morgan, Jen Gill, and of course, Sarah Skovland, Bill Frank, and John Cooney for being here today with us. So, our first question. I beg your pardon? What am I doing first? Oh, good point. Thank you for reminding me. It's been a little crazy here this morning, and I'm glad that Solveig is on top of things. The first questions that I have are ones that came in over the email this week. And since we're going to try to do a question box again next week, and then we will move into topical services again, I would invite some of you to send in your questions as well. The first question comes from someone who chooses to be anonymous, again, the most prolific writer of all time. And that person asks, what qualities would you most like to see in our new minister? What a wonderful questions. Because it's certainly true that I have an investment in your new minister. I would love to see this congregation not only thrive, but soar. And I think it's wonderful that you have such an outstanding search committee that every single pre-candidate with whom I have spoken has told me that your search committee was the best one they have spoken to. But enough side talk. What are the qualities I would most like to see in your new minister? First, I would like to see your new minister who is someone who is deeply grounded in their own spiritual practice so that they may both be able to be attentive to you and to have an attentive presence, and then to be able to have a reflective practice where that minister is able to think through best from their experience what they know this congregation needs, what your needs are, what your hopes are. So your hopes and fears need to be assessed by someone who is grounded in that way. I'm so pleased to see that the new president of, well, now 3 years president of the Unitarian Universalist Association has that quality of being able to ground and reflect before speaking, before responding to what is asked. So that is one of the qualities. And another quality that I hope they have is a thick skin. A minister is an amazing projection screen for a congregation, for all the family issues that you bring as individuals, and for the larger dreams of the community. So having a thick skin is really a good thing to have when you're going to be a minister of any congregation. It's important. Those two will be sufficient for now. There are many more that you have in your own minds. And I want to remind you during the candidating week to spend some time thinking about the questions you want to ask your ministerial candidate when they come to meet you and you to meet them. Do be thinking about those questions. The second question that I received is, what is the difference between being religious and being spiritual? What do you mean when you use the term spiritual? Well, I have a very specific definition about spiritual and spirituality, and I think it's important to start with that. What do I mean when I use the term spiritual? One of the things that I mean, and the most important to me, is that I can experience a connection with more than myself, a connection with more than myself, whether it be with a tree, whether it be with a flower, whether I feel that connection with an animal. I certainly feel it with both our dogs, a deep connection with them. Do I feel a connection with a consciousness larger than my own? Do I feel that to the degree that I can feel inspired, energized, and moved forward in my life? I may even feel guidance from that connection that says, this is the way you should go with your life now. With myself being in a stage of contemplating retirement, I am thinking about and trying to connect with that understanding so that I can get a picture, a dream, a vision of what my life will be over the next years. For me, that all is part of spirituality. And I need to add that it is not supernatural. I feel that everything I can experience must be natural because I can experience it. And I'm very much a natural being of this world. So it's not an oogly boogly, otherworldly kind of thing, although I do experience it as much larger than myself. So, what's the difference between being religious and being spiritual? For me, being religious is about how I behave in this world here and now. In some ways, it's about the institutions I support. It's about the organizations that I feel called to spend time, talent, and treasure with. It's about those institutions which try to bring the values, the spiritual values that I most value into the world. For me, being spiritual is bringing that connection to greater consciousness, not only for myself, within myself, but within and among the people whose lives I touch and whose lives touch mine. To feel, being spiritual is about feeling those connections as well as working for values. So that's a distinction I make. It in all likelihood is not the same as yours, and I honor yours, your understanding of the difference between being religious and being spiritual. I just thought of an example. Being religious is coming to church on Sunday, seeing my friends, the people I care for, again in a wonderful way. Being spiritual is feeling deeply the connections we share, the passions that we have for truth and justice, for beauty, for love. And that's why love is spiritual. It's definitely a feeling. So let us now sing the third verse of We Laugh, We Cry, or Credo. I can't help myself. I really want Shelley to have the name she chose for this hymn. Okay, Larry. Our lives are full of wonder and our time is very brief. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, we share in death, we live life, getting us strength above, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that is in our living is us. And now we go to Solveig.
So the first question is, were you always a Unitarian?
Was I always a Unitarian? You know, I think sometimes all of us were always Unitarians, we just didn't know it. And to be perfectly honest, I am truly a Unitarian universalist. It's interesting to me the way we leave the second half of our denomination out. And it's the great heart of universalism that called me to this denomination. Now, for the facts of the matter, I was actively seeking a religious, spiritual home after I married my husband, ex-husband now, who was a proclaimed atheist. And I knew that I needed a community, some sort of community, at least a place to be in the choir, if nothing else. So I was attending all sorts of churches that my parents had taken me to as a child because my parents didn't really land very much in a church, they just followed ministers. So I went to a Presbyterian church that was okay, but not as good as the one I went to in college. I went to a Methodist church, which felt a little stiff for me. And then I started talking to my ex-husband's best friend's date most times, Rosemary DiLorenzo. And Rosemary was the kind of person who went to Mass every Saturday night vigil before we went out drinking and dancing. And she would be asked by one or another of us, how was Mass? And she would say, same old magic show. And she went faithfully, and it was important to her, and I honor that. So I was talking to her about the issues that were concerning me about the languages in the churches I went to. Remember, this was 1967. Yes, I'm that old. So Rosemary looked at me after a while and said, "You're a Unitarian Universalist." What's that? She said, "You need to go to the church in Schenectady on this street downtown." And so I did. First Sunday in the new year, cold, upstate New York, cold, minus 35 at night. And I went through the door, and it was a big circle. And I found that the choir was over on one side, so I went over and sat where I could hear them. And I found that the minister was preaching on Unitarian Universalism. And he said that Unitarianism emphasizes thought and rationality and science, and that was really valuable. And he said that Universalism emphasized loving, paying attention to each other, working for justice, and that was wonderful. And then he said that they were both very good ideas, but we didn't do them well enough. And that what each one of us needed to do was to think about how we could use our minds better and how we could use our hearts better. And I had a born again experience, just like that, right there in the church. I was just so excited to hear this kind of message. And so I was sort of at a loss of what to do when the service was over. And I was wandering around in the sanctuary. I didn't know about coffee hours, and I don't drink coffee. They probably invited me, but I didn't know about it. So I was wandering around in that beautiful, beautiful building designed by Isidore Stone with two gorgeous stone fireplaces on either side when this tall, skinny lady with short black hair ran up to me and said, "You are going to be in the choir, and I've got to figure out who's got to leave." Little did I know that this was the choir director, A, and B, she had a choir of 12, no matter what. Selected and working together, I was dumbfounded. So not only did I find a religious organization I could be with in January of 1968, I found a choir I could sing with. Remarkable. I always felt a little funky about the restrictions on the membership to the choir, but I did get to go all around New England and fundraise for tracker organs with that choir. All around New England for the old tracker organs. So that's enough of that story, I guess.
Making sure the mic was still on. We did turn off all of our non-essential Wi-Fi in the service, so I thought I couldn't see the live chat, but I'm on with my phone with the
Okay.
data. So if people do want to ask, questions in the chat, I'd be happy to ask those. The next one that we had from the past sheets is how do you define God? Kind of similar to the last one, but I wasn't sure where you were going to go
With that
with
one.
the previous. So you can be briefer if you want with this one, whatever.
Oh, that's a loaded one, isn't it? Yeah, that's quite a loaded question. And it's loaded with so much baggage. I remember a member of my congregation in Reston, Virginia, in the DC area, who the minute I said the word God, and God forbid I said Jesus in the service, would stand up and walk out and make sure everyone knew she was walking out. So finally, I took the time to catch her one day before she was gone and say, "Wilma, I noticed that you stand up and walk out every time we say the word God or sing it or anything." And she said, "Every single morning of my childhood, my mother got me up and beat me to beat the devil out of me in the name of God." I was glad I had asked that question, as shocked as I was, because Wilma and I had many conversations, and I was honored to attend her death and be part of her memorial service. And she stopped walking out, and we really became good friends through that conversation about God. Which comes back to the first answer to this question: how do I define God? Which God? Which God are you talking about when you say that word? Because I want to find out what that word means to you. I do have my own definition, and that is, for me, I am not looking so much for a God as I am looking for an experience of life force, a source for my own heart and soul and spirit to move through the world with as much consciousness and grace as I can. And you can tell that sometimes I'm not so good at it, and I have had my challenges with it. But for me, what is ultimate is what I'm looking for. What has the most power in my life? What guides my life? What gives me meaning in my life? And that is a source of not only energy, but insight, a source of wholeness and a feeling of being effective in the world and belonging in the world. And so for me, it doesn't have an anthropomorphic being. For me, it is literally an energy source that I experience rather than see or feel. I'm not anticipating an old man on a throne anytime soon.
So I want to apologize if people had trouble hearing me earlier. I was probably speaking too quickly. And I can see the questions now. Elizabeth Rossi has a question.
Mhm.
How do you think the congregation has changed since you arrived? And how can we best support our new minister?
Oh, boy, that's two big questions. What I experience with this congregation that's different is more energy, more life in the congregation, more laughter. When I first came, it was kind of flat. And now at coffee hour and in the services, we seem to have grown comfortable with each other. I love that. I know that I have differences in ways with each one of you, and you, I see, are learning to work together. The amazing work Chris Duvall has done with the program council has broken down some of the walls between different groups, and communications seem to be going better, which I'm pleased with so much. All of John Cooney and Marina Rose's work on communications is continuing, and the Communications Committee is finding ways that we are solidifying how can we be connected within and among each other so that it is healthy and useful. The writing of both your vision, mission, covenant and your covenant of right relations is a wondrous thing. You've developed wonderful facilitators, some of whom you've always had, who have helped you as a congregation to come to know what's important among each other and that it will be different and that you can work that out. That doesn't have to be a huge boulder in the road of going forward together. So those are some of the things that I see. And I know you always had a good time together, and I'm glad to see back the New Year's Eve party and the development of the Thanksgiving dinner, and of course, Sarah Scoveland's work with the Christmas gathering, which is so much appreciated. We're getting together more often again, and I find that really very gratifying. And what was the second question?
What can we do? Well, what can we do to prepare for the new minister?
I'm going to do a whole sermon on that in May. So I'm going to wait and invite you to pay attention when that sermon comes up. I know it's a little disorienting right now because our services are not what they were planned to be. And we are working through a lot of different details to do the services well for you and to also make it possible for fewer and fewer of us to need to be in this room and in possible danger from the coronavirus. So part of that is real too. Um, so I'll ask you to come back for that one.
Thank you. This is a kind of a funny interstitial question from the past, which I showed you before the service, so you're
Right.
prepared. A Catholic priest, a rabbi, and a UU minister walk into a bar. Blank.
I really didn't have time to prepare for
Yeah, there's
that
no.
one.
It's just funny that this was one of the questions written for
I
the
can
stump the
almost,
minister.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I can almost guarantee that someone actually has made a joke about that, or 20 someones have made jokes about that. I have been with a Catholic priest and a Jewish rabbi in a bar, and I have found, well, this is nothing new, right? Yeah, the first thing that I thought of when you read it to me before was, wow, I wonder what kind of drink each one would order. And that got me sidetracked. So let me just say that mostly we love to talk about what we are passionate about in each of our religions. And having been a student in two different Jesuit universities, all my graduate work was done in Jesuit universities. I frequently find a great deal of common ground with both a Catholic priest and a Jewish rabbi, because I also have been a ringer for holy days in the temples. In other words, they paid me to come in and beef out the choir. So it was just great fun and something I enjoyed immeasurably. I think that a Roman Catholic priest, a Jewish rabbi, and a Unitarian Universalist minister can go together into a bar, have a friendly drink together, and find common ground.
So we do have another question. These are really good questions
Yeah.
from Danielle Martin. Are there any readings or works I can reference that would be especially comforting during this time of social distancing?
Wow, yes. First of all, I would refer you to the messages at uua.org from the president, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. She just yesterday put out a wonderful, inspirational video that you can access and hear her speak from her heart about these times. And it's just been a joy to see a president of the UUA who can go deep and go wide, and truly you feel their compassion for the people they are addressing. And I think she said, I love you at least 5 times to all of us. And she means it. So that's where I would start. I would also invite you to check out the final messages at the Church of the Larger Fellowship from the Reverend Meg Riley, who does a wonderful job with the Church of the Larger Fellowship and is retiring in June to become co moderator of the Unitarian Universalist Association. She is running for that position. And I can't think of a better person. She will be sharing it with someone else in all likelihood. And it will be wonderful. But Meg is a wonderful writer. And if you want to laugh and just have some wonderful wit that has a huge heart behind it, check out Meg Barnhouse's books and her website. She is a minister in Texas. She has a good folks style. She sings, she writes music, she and her wife perform together, and it's just a wonderful thing to see that spirit. There are so many things that you can find at uua.org worship web, and try that too. We do have so many of our people, whether ministry or lay persons, reaching out to others to help us get through these hard times. And I think it's time to sing. So let's sing the fourth verse of the We Laugh, We Cry. together in life and in the strength of love, and we have found our being together, and in our search for peace, maybe we'll finally see even to Gwen's. Do we have another question from our folks online? I one more, and then we will do some of our joys and sorrows and some of the announcements that I have received.
I think there aren't. I had said I thought we didn't know we were going to do another question. There's a lot of gratitude to everybody being expressed on these chats. So thank you everybody in general and everybody who's here. Jeannie says such gratitude for all the difficult and expert work it took to put our fellowship into services together. These services are lively and feels like our community. Thank you. And then Elizabeth Rossi wanted to say that our cellist circles are meeting via Zoom if people want small group connections during this period. So everybody who's on the chat can obviously see this. So reading it again may not make that much difference except for people who are sitting here. And there also, everything is in the church's email blast. Yeah, so I think that's it for
Questions?
People can email you more for next week, I think.
Oh, yeah, I hope they will. And we've got such a store of those that we never even got to the first time I did the question box service. So it's pretty exciting. So thank you, Solveig, very much for having reminded us how we can give an offering to the church through PayPal, and how, of course, the mail still works. Snail mail still works. And we have many ways to be able to connect that way too and support one another. I want to read a couple of announcements that are important. First, from Bob Holden and Alex Stagner. You will have seen it, but some of you may not have. And I really appreciated what they put together as a message. We live in uncertain times. Some say we are in a new normal. New normal? That is to be scoffed at. We have always lived in uncertain times. Stay with us here. After some gloominess, we will finish with some reassuring optimism. That's Bob Holden for sure. Alan Watts, a scholar of Eastern philosophies, talked about embracing uncertainty. His point was that life is unpredictable. It has always been so. It will always be so. The perception of certainty, safety, stability is and has always been an illusion. Yikes! Today's uncertainty is the coronavirus. 3 years ago, our uncertainty was the departure of our called minister. In 2008, it was the Great Recession. Before that, it was 9/11, then the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon, and the oil crisis going back. Before that, it was World War II, the Great Depression, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, when Washington's army was nearly defeated into oblivion, the mini ice age climate change around the 16th century, the violence of the Protestant Reformation, several waves of the Black Plague. On a personal level, we have death, divorce, illness, poverty, natural disaster, yada, yada, yada. This obviously is Bob Holden. Well, we know that. In between all that negative uncertainty, we also had the Renaissance, lest we forget, Baroque art and music, the Enlightenment, human rights, the Impressionist art movement, Unitarianism, Universalism, vaccines for measles and polio, Robert Frost. I love that. Robert Frost, let us be thankful. Jazz, Maya Angelou, Barack Obama, and the Cubs won a World Series. How amazing. On a personal level, we have weddings, babies, graduations, and puppies and kittens. In a few months, we hope to have a new called minister. So let's not allow today's uncertainty to define our normal for tomorrow. Here are three quotes that encourage us to move toward a normal of our choosing and not one placed upon us. In his first inaugural address, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, fireside, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It's unlikely he knew it at that time, but that kernel of wisdom is profoundly Buddhist and we think true. When all seemed lost for the British Empire and that an invasion of England by the Nazis appeared imminent, Winston Churchill defiantly proclaimed, we shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. That's the human spirit. There is not much spirituality or philosophy there, just a cantankerous individual refusing to give in to a particular new normal. No, they won't, he admonished the British people. This too shall pass. This is a famous quote that sounds nicely biblical. It turns out it does not actually come from the Bible, and no one really knows who's first said it. Nonetheless, the phrase is grounding. George Harrison knew. It's also sound advice. Soon enough, we will be back to another normal. So let's proactively choose today to create a future normal we prefer, one we prefer, and not fall victim to a particular new normal motivated by fear. Here are a few suggestions that will warm your soul and spark a future of our making. Write a paper letter to an old friend and mail it United States Postal Service. Call a loved one on the phone, enjoy the sound of their voice, listen with enthusiasm and compassion as that person shares with you their thoughts. Visualize and plan for a future of your intention and desire. And write an email to Alex or Bob with your pledge commitment for next year. Is it okay to talk about the pledge drive now? It is the first step toward getting back to business as usual and refusing to let a flawed new normal diminish our future. I love that. So you all know where your pledge card is, and if you don't, send us a note. We'll take care of that. And we hope to receive all pledges by today, March 22nd. With the shelter in place order, please either mail your pledge to UUFRC or email your pledge ambassador, Alex or Bob, with your pledge commitment for next year. Please note the pledge commitment you make this month is not due until a time of your preference in our next fiscal year, which is from July 1st, 2020 to June 2021. Lots of time. Whatever normal is in place then will not be the one today. That's something to which we can look forward. So be optimistic and generous. I also have a lovely testimonial from the Taylor Abra family that I want to share with you. Those of you who have treasured Rachel in our religious education programs, Graham, who quietly attends our Committee on Ministries, and of course, Eliana and Eden, who dance in our services, sometimes to music, sometimes to their own drum. This is some words from them. They say, dear friends, Now, more than ever, in these challenging and uncertain times, we highly value the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Redwood City, its community, and everything that it brings to our family. We have gained friends, connections, and stimulating experiences that enrich our lives and inspire us to better ourselves. The staff and community members who volunteer their time for religious education and childcare do an exceptional job. Our girls feel safe and loved and genuinely look forward to coming to UUFRC. There are many ways to give to the church and community through time, skills, effort, and financial donation. Pledging has given us a sense of connection and dedication to the church. The coming weeks and months will require much from all of us as we face a national health crisis. You may recall that Graham Abra is involved with public health for us. And UUFRC is an important part of the local fabric of our community that will help many in need. For all these reasons, we value our membership and give what we can in pledge. This year, we have increased our giving by 25%. Thank you. Thank you.